So it says here, then Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus and said, Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. For as I was passing through and considering the objects of your worship, I even found an altar with the inscription, the unknown God. He says, therefore, the one whom you worship without knowing, he says, him I proclaim to you. Let me park here for a moment. That's why I wanted to go back to those two verses. Because now their curiosity is extremely piqued. Because you're saying that you can tell us who this unknown God is. So Paul goes on in verse 24 and says, God, who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, since he gives to all life, breath, and all things. He has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwelling. 27. So they should seek the Lord in the hope that they might grope him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As also some of you, your own poets, have said, we are also his offspring. Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone or something shaped by art and man's devising. Truly, these times of ignorance God overlooked, but now commands all men everywhere to repent, because he has appointed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man, capital M, whom he has ordained. He has given assurance of this to all by raising him from the dead. And when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, but others said, we want to hear more about this. So Paul departed from among them. However, some men joined him and believed. Among them, watch this, y'all, was Dionysius and Areopagus, a woman named Damaris, and others with them. Dionysius, Areopagus, Damaris, they believed. They were saved. I can't wait to kind of unpack this a little bit as we look at this text. So, to set the scene for us tonight, what's important for us to understand is that Paul now has an inroad to give witness. He has an inroad to be able to witness, and it didn't take long for philosophers that were around after they heard about this, what was going down at what's called the Agora, the Areopagus, right? And so when they listened, they gave a couple of different responses. If we look at this earlier in that text from last week, we saw they said, "Well, this man's a babbler," and some said, "Oh, he's just talking like everybody else." But the council here of Areopagus, they were responsible. These are the ones that invited him to come and continue to talk about this God, because they have been worshiping. Think about this, y'all. They had been worshiping an idol with the inscription to the unknown God. Lord have mercy. How many people today worship at the place, worship in the pew, and worship on the altar in the proximity of God, but to them, he's still unknown? Lord have mercy. So to set this up, Paul is now invited by this council. He's invited by this council, and it was natural for this council because the council of Areopagus, they were responsible for watching over not just the religion but the education in the city. So instead of them outright rejecting him, and let me say this too, this is when you know um, people are in at least pursuit of wisdom. What's this? They don't immediately reject ideology until they investigate more of what the ideology represents. Whew, gotta keep going. Because see, a fool is somebody who will just tell somebody just to be quiet and don't even know what they said yet. Lord have mercy. A fool is someone who will keep on talking, only to discover what they're talking about is not even related to the subject matter that they've been talking about. So they invite Paul, come, hey man, we want you to come and talk a little bit more about this. So they offer him this courteous invitation to come and present this doctrine or this teaching um, at this informal meeting. We want to hear you first, and then if it's something worthy to be perpetuated and discussed, we'll make that determination. So Paul now, watch this, y'all. Paul now recognizes I got an opportunity. I wish I had somebody catch this. He said, "Man, all I needed was an opportunity, and I got an opportunity." So Paul's message here, as he presents this message, as he makes this presentation to all of this wise counsel, it was masterful in his communication. It was masterful because what he did was, and we're going to see it here, he starts where the people are. He started where they were. Because if you look at the text here, he says in verse 24, God who made the world without knowing him, or without knowing, I'm sorry, God who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands. Now, he's starting with where they are because he's saying, I know that y'all have these temples. I know that y'all have these statues. God who made the world and everything in it, he is Lord of heaven and earth. He doesn't dwell in temples. So he starts where they are. He's referring to their altar dedicated to the unknown God, because that's his sticking point right there. You all are worshiping an idol, the description, the unknown God. So he starts where they are. But then after he starts where they are really kind of pecking at that. He now gets them interested. They're extremely interested. And then he goes on and he explains who that God is and what he is like. Wait a minute, I wish y'all can see it like I see it. So Paul sees this idol, he sees this statue, and you all are worshiping this statue to the unknown God. He starts where they are. He says, you build these temples, have these altars, and as he's going there, you have an altar dedicated to this unknown God. Their interest is aroused because he then explains who that God is and what he is like. What God? The unknown God. Imagine with me, you all. These people have been worshiping this statue at this altar of this idol with the inscription, the unknown God. And now comes a fella that just came out of Berea, and he says he's going to tell us who he is and what he's like. Yeah, they said, we want you to go ahead and finish talking. So he concludes the message here with the personal application. And he's going to, he's going to, at the end where we see Dionysius and Demara and And the others who leave, he's going to leave them pretty much with the moral decision, right? So he's going to make the argument. So hopefully, what I've tried to do is give an overview of what we're going to unpack here in the next 30 minutes or so. Okay. So Paul opens up his address. We look at this. It's very complimentary. He says, hey, in verse 22, what I see is that, hey, you're very religious. Matter of fact, you're so religious that you even made an altar to the unknown God. Lord have mercy. So as he's making this proclamation, I want you to see, if they didn't know, what he's really saying is, if you don't know this God, how can you worship him? Let me park here for a moment in case you don't know how this connects to your life and mine. How can we worship a God that we don't know? And if we are doing what we call worship to God and of God, then it tends to mean that we know him. Oh, God. I think I asked the question Sunday or maybe last week. Before we do anything else, do you really know him? Because what Paul is saying here, you're very religious. So much so that you have an idol and an altar with the inscription on the idol, the unknown God, and you still go and worship that. And the question is this: if you don't know this God, how can you worship? Y'all see how this works? Or not even that. If you don't know this God, not only how can you worship, but how can he help you? So Paul is making a wonderful argument, and it's one that I believe that we need to make today, in today's church, in today's body of believers, before we go to the calisthenics and the activity of raising our hands and jumping and and shouting and doing all of the things in which we have been trained to do. I think it's good. I wish y'all would type this. Do you? Just type do you. I think it's good to ask one another, do you know him? I think that would make preaching a lot easier. I think that would make teaching a lot easier. I think that would make singing a lot easier. I think that would make the experience when we come together as a body of believers a lot easier. If we can qualify the fact that all of us who are here, even tonight in this Bible study, do you know him? Because that's going to determine, watch this, not only your input, but it's going to impact your output. So in this particular message that Paul, as he's able to begin to share, and if you remember back in Acts chapter 14, Acts chapter 14 at Lystra, you remember it's going to sound kind of like the same type of sermon. And guess what, y'all? That's okay, because there's nothing else that needs to be preached. Oh, I wish I had somebody catch this, because we've been so trained on hearing something new and different, new and something different. The reality of the fact is, y'all, the gospel is the same. Paul opens up here in verse 24. In verse 24, what he's talking about is the greatness of God, because he's saying God is the creator. And here's what I think is so masterful about Paul's presentation here, because he understands his audience. This is a philosophical audience. This is a thinking audience. And some of the things that he drilled down to were just some of the basic he didn't ask these questions, but he understood his audience. And one thing that he knows is that anybody who does think, they, where did I come from? They have to be thinking that. Anybody that thinks, why am I here? And then the third thing would be, where am I going? Those are three areas of thought that anybody with a brain that thinks, you've either thought it, you're thinking it, or at some point you're going to think about it. Where did I come from? I'm not talking about my mother and father. Where did I come from? Why am I here? And ultimately, where am I going? Now, what's interesting here, because Paul knows his audience, science kind of answers, or it tries to answer the first question with where did I come from? When I say science, I mean biologically. It wasn't a stork prophetess. There was a consummation. There was an incubation, and then there was a manifestation of that consummation, which is where we have a mother and a father. You know, chromosomes and all that. So science kind of answers that on where did I come from. Now it doesn't go beyond that. Notice science doesn't get, Lord have mercy. Science doesn't get involved before the seed of man. Now the Lord gets involved before the seed of man. Watch this, y'all. Jeremiah, before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. I gotta. Where did I come from? Science tries to answer that, right? But then another question would not only be, why am I here, or where did I come from? Another question is, why am I here? So science kind of answers that. Where did I come from? The person that doesn't think beyond the seed. Lord have mercy. That is a rich, rich piece of information there. I got to remember that. Science can only go back to the seed. Okay. So then it goes from where did I come from? Why am I here? Well, philosophy, it wrestles with, with why am I here? There are different reasons philosophically we can say why we're here. You were just here, to be the doctor you became, or to be the preacher you became, or to be the servant you became, or be the whatever you became. Philosophy can kind of talk about that whole why am I here. Now it doesn't go, what's this, beyond philosophy, because what goes beyond philosophy, and when I say beyond, watch this. Let me back up. When I talk about the seed, science doesn't precede the seed. Philosophy doesn't precede purpose. See, the purpose is where philosophy can't go. Um, Eternity is where the science of the seed can't go. And then finally, we have not just where did I come from, why am I here, but really everybody, they have half the thought process. They've got to think about where they're going. I was in a situation yesterday, and one thing that, man, it really, really blew my mind. And I uh, told another individual, I said, man, I'm got a sermon on this. And the short version of the long story is that what I discovered is that the day is going to come for us, you all, where all the evidence has to be filed before you get to the judge. Yeah, you got to have it all in, because on that day, the judge is not accepting anything you bring in. It has to be filed before. And so when we're talking about not where did we come from or why we're here, but when we start thinking about where we're going, let me tell you what I want to share with you regarding what I just told you. You better get all your evidence in. In other words, you better make sure that if you plan to live in peace forever with God and in the presence of God, all the evidence of that better be turned in before you reach trial. Because when we look at this, Paul is talking about this. He says, I'm going to tell y'all who this unknown God is. I want y'all to catch this because that is so mind blowing. He's talking to all of these individuals who have pursued knowledge and pursued intellect, and who have looked to pull the formula together as it relates to proper application of knowledge and experience to create wisdom. Paul comes along and says, I'm going to tell you about the God you all worship, that y'all call unknown. He's well known. He helps us understand that as a believer, watch this, why am I here? Or where did I come from? Why am I here? Science tries to speak, where did I come from? Philosophy tries to speak, why am I here? But only gospel can give a satisfactory answer to all. It can deal with where you came from, it deals with why you're here, and it can deal with where you're going. The Epicureans, you heard me mention them earlier. The Epicureans, they were atheists. They didn't, I mean, an atheist is not a devil worshiper. Atheists don't believe in nothing. They basically believe that all was matter and matter was always. Did y'all hear what I said? They just, everything is just what it is. Listen, everything is matter and matter always was. And that's just it. That's what atheists believe. But we have the Stoics as well, because you have the Epicureans, you have the Stoics, because this is that council. And and this is Bible study, so I'm just trying to teach it. Or I hope you're not looking for me to try to preach this or anything. I'm just really trying to teach this. So you have these Epicureans that are atheists, and you have these Stoics, and they said everything was God. I mean, you got the whole spirit of the universe. Everything is God. Okay? You have the Epicureans that are atheists. You have the Stoics that believe that everything's God. And then from there, they not only believed that everything was God, but they believed that pretty much God didn't create anything. They believed that what God did was is that He just put everything in an organized manner, and He put some kind of law and order. Are y'all following me? The atheists, I mean, they don't, they just believe what was it was and what is. Don't believe in it. The Stoics believe that everything's, and they believe God exists, but they don't believe that He created it. They just believe that He put everything in order. Okay? I'm teach. I mean, and I'm giving you a real short version. You want to do deeper studies into these different groups. It may be good, just so that you can kind of see what's out there. But Paul here, he makes it very clear. In the beginning, God. Watch this, verse 24. God, who made the world and everything in it, since He is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands. Wait a minute, verse 25. Nor is He worshipped with men's hands as though He needed anything, since He gives to all life, breath, and all things. So Paul is affirming here that in the beginning, God. John said it best. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. You see that? In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. John said he was in the beginning. I need somebody to get this. With God. Wait a minute. When we talk about God, of course, Paul is going to lead us toward Jesus. When John makes this reference, in the beginning was God. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. The Word was God. Listen, when you say this word was in the beginning, the term was interesting that it can be was in the beginning, which a was is a past tense term. Watch me now. Was is a past tense term. Now that's the information that John said. The revelation that when I read it just today earlier, that word was stuck out to me because I'm saying, wow, there's a past tense term that's in the beginning, which means that past tense term existed before the beginning. So Paul affirms in the beginning God. God made the world, he made everything in it. He's Lord of everything. He is here's something that began to pique their interest as well, because he's making it clear that this God is not a distant God. This God is not divorced from his creation, but also this God is not he's not a God that's locked in creation. Your gods are all locked in creation because y'all made them. God have mercy. But here is what Paul is saying that I think also piques their interest. He says, this God is too great to be housed in a temple. So, in other words, it's the only place, and this is what some people believe, even today. Some people believe that you have to go, quote unquote, down to the church house to meet God. Yeah, they won't say it out loud because they know it probably didn't make sense. Some people believe that God is only in a place. Listen, God is everywhere. God can't be housed in a man-made temple. But not only that, he's too great. But here's the beautiful thing about it. God is not too great to be concerned about all of our needs. You all have heard me mention this before. Um, I have a message entitled, How Big is Your God? And, I talk about, you know, just the unfathomable massiveness of God. But then the real point of the message is, as big as this God is, he's so big, he can handle your smallest issue. He can handle your smallest problem. He can handle your smallest pain. Paul is making this, interestingly, curious for them because he's saying this God that you have come to the altar of with the inscription over the idol to the unknown God, this God can be known because this God exists. Not only does he talk about the greatness of God, he moves in his presentation. Just he doesn't just talk about how great this God is. Then in verse 25, he talks about how good he is. Because in verse 25, you see it right here. He says, listen, I want you to see, he is worshiped. He is not worshiped with men's hands as though he needed anything, since he gives all life, breath. And he's saying, listen, God is so good. He's so big, right? We know how great he is. He's made, now he starts honing in. Paul starts getting into the message because he starts talking about how not only is he creator of everything, but he's also ruler and provider of everything. So the goodness of God here, many people, just like the Athenians, pride themselves in serving God. But the reality is, you all, God serves us. Catch me before you say I'm being heretical. Catch me before you think I'm being apostate or out here. When I say God serves us, does he not serve us every day with a wake up call? Does he not serve us by putting sight in our eyes, hearing in our ears, sound in our mouth, feeling in our touch? Listen, if God is God, then he is self sufficient. He doesn't need anything that man can supply. Ooh. And just like he doesn't need anything that man can supply, and I tell you that God doesn't need any temples to contain him. Not only the temples don't contain him, right? But also what Paul is saying here, the services in the temple add nothing to God. We serve not to, when people say they're going to give God time or they're going to give God some service, and and I don't say, I hear pastors challenge people with this. You need to give, you need to give God some of your service, give God some of your gifts, et cetera, et cetera. Listen, the reality of the fact is, no matter what we give, it's not going to add to God. God doesn't need any of it. But in these brief statements that where he's saying God is not contained in a temple, in the services, all this stuff you do, that doesn't add to God. Paul absolutely wiped out their whole religious system. And I'll tell you why I love talking about this part in the book of Acts, because where Paul wipes out the whole religious system in Greece, I believe today God is still looking for those of us who will stand on business when it comes to his word and who he is, his greatness and his goodness, that's willing to wipe out the religious systems of today. That's why all of these these pop-up lines and all of these different, I talk about the prayer lines all the time, but it's not just the prayer lines, but all of these activities that we do. The question we have to ask ourselves, oh, have mercy, I'm itching. Question we have to ask ourselves, are we really adding to the kingdom? Because we're not doing anything to add to God. All they're saying is, all this worshiping you do, y'all religious. You're very religious. But it's God who gives us what we need. He gives us our life, gives us our breath, and he gives us all things. So when we talk about God serving us, thank God he serves us. Our service does not do anything for God. Watch this. Our service does everything for us. Somebody type serve. Yeah. But you're not serving because God is moved by your service. God services us in everything about our life. God is the source of every good and every perfect gift. He gave us life. He sustains our life by his goodness. Not only that, he's not only great, he's good. And instead of worshiping the creator and glorifying him, what Paul is saying is men have worshiped whew, his own creation and glorified themselves. Watch this. Instead of worshiping the creator, we're worshiping his creation and glorify ourselves. We are his creation. W- Instead of worshiping him, we worship everything that we do. We worship jobs, we worship money, we worship where we live, we worship what we have. Uh, Heck, some of us worship each other. He goes on to make this point. He moves throughout this argument. He's making this point of how great God is. He's making this point, him being the creator of all. He also makes this point of how good God is. He's showing us here that as he talks about how good God is, he's talking about how all the provisions we have, he provides. But not only does he talk about how good God is as a provider, not only does he talk about how great God is as a creator, but he talks about how God rules over all of this. He talks about government, God. Um, the gods of the Greek, they were distant. The Greek gods, and that, Zeus and Isis, and you all have heard some of these Greek gods and mythological beings. But these gods were distant. Um, they had no concern for the problems and the needs of man. All they had concern for and I'm just kind of giving you um, a really basic view of these gods. These gods weren't coming down to serve man and to be concerned about man. And Paul is making this clear to them because and really what Paul is saying, I think it's interesting to me. Paul is saying, out of all the gods y'all have all throughout Africa, this one to the unknown God, this one points you to the God, not the gods, the God. The one that, watch this, the one that's unknown is the one that points you to God. Isn't that ironic? Because you all have names of all these other gods. You have shrines of all these other gods. You have altars, all these other gods. You have temples for all these other gods. But this one that has no name, this one that I'm telling you about, is actually the one that you need to know. The unknown God is the one I came to tell you about today. So look, the government of this God, verses 26 through 29. Let's just look at this right quick. And he has made from one blood every nation of men. I'm sorry, y'all. This might start doing something. I don't know. He has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwelling, so that they should seek the Lord, in the hope they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as also some of your own poets have said, we are also his offspring. Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver, etc. He goes on. What he's helping us to understand is that the God of creation is also this unknown God. Because Paul, notice what he said. He opened up by saying, I'm going to tell y'all who he is. And I'm going to tell y'all what he's like. That's why they're sitting there looking. Can't you imagine? This whole time that this unknown God has been sitting over here, we've been going and worshiping. We never even realized that we didn't know him. Because what we came to know about him, watch this, is that he's unknown. And Paul says, I'm telling y'all who he is. I'm going to tell you how great he is. I'm going to tell you how good he is. I'm going to tell you his governmental oversight. When we look at this, because he goes on in verse 26, he says, listen, he created mankind from one man, verse number 26. And here's the thing, so that all nations are basically, what he's saying is, made of the same stuff, have the same blood. Now, wait a minute. Let me tell you what's happening here. I'm almost out of time. Let me tell you what's happening here. That became a problem for them because the Greeks felt that they were a special race. They thought they were special. They thought they were different from all the other nations. Paul comes in and says, nope, nope, nope. Even your land was a gift from God. Yeah. So it's not the power of man, but it's the government of God that determines the rise and fall of nations. Even in the context of where we are in the U.S. today. I watch the news every day just for the purpose of keeping up with what's going on. But none of that news shakes me, y'all, because God is still in control. He still sits high and looks low. He is the master of the universe. He's the creator of all things. And so Paul's logical conclusion here for them was to say, listen, God made us in his image. I don't care who tries to separate races or who tries to say one is better than the other and one is lesser than the other. Listen, God made us in his image, and it's foolish for us to make gods in our own image. Because really, all Greek religion it was nothing but manufacturing the worship of these gods who patterned after men who act like them. Let me close this out. I got to go. The last few verses. So we talked about the greatness of God, goodness of God. I very quickly hit the government of God. But here's the sticking point. I want to talk about the grace of God. Not only is he the creator of all things, not only is he the provider of all things, not only is he the ruler of all things, he's also Savior. Look, verses 30 through 34, I won't read it, but as he brought his message to a close, he summarizes with clear evidence that God is a God of grace. I don't know about you all, but I'm so glad to know that he's a God of grace. Because for centuries, he points out how God was patient with man's sin and ignorance. It's right in the text. Look at it. It doesn't mean that we weren't guilty, but it does mean that God held back divine wrath. Paul is making it clear. And this is how clear we need to make it today, you all. That's why Bible study, I don't try to, and I'm going to try to be entertaining in Bible study. I just try to teach this thing, try to make it as engaging and fun and but yet informative and revelatory as possible. Because this is really the bottom line. Out of all of what Paul talks about, excuse me, to these Athenians and to these Stoics and to these Epicureans and all of these philosophers, ultimately what Paul wants to get to is the fact that this unknown God, and I've just told you who he is, let me tell you what he's like. He's a God of grace. Doesn't mean that we weren't guilty, y'all. God's been patient with our sins and with our ignorance. He goes on to talk about resurrection. Of course, that made some really step back because the doctrine of resurrection for them, most of the members' council, they couldn't accept it. Here's the sad reason why. Because the way they thought, believe it or not, y'all, the way I believe, there's some people that think this today. The body is only a prison, just a prison. The sooner somebody can leave their body, the happier they will be. That's not all there is to life. I'm done. They they believed in immortality. They didn't believe in the resurrection. They didn't believe in resurrection. They had three different types of responses. Now, music is playing. Some of them laughed. See it here. Some of them mocked. There were others who said, hey, I want to know more, want to hear more. But then we had a small group. Areopagite, Dionysius. We had a small group that said, you know what? We accept what you're saying. And so when you had Damaris and Areopagite and Dionysius, it was just a few. Because remember, y'all, at Thessalonica, a whole hall of people came. At Berea, a whole hall of people came. Please don't miss my closing point here that I'm making. Some laughed, some mocked, some said we want to hear more. Small group of them accepted what Paul said. They believed and they were saved. When you contrast these 2 or 3 people that believed and heard what Paul said, as opposed to Berea, Thessalonica, where it says not few, but many heard, believed, and received what Paul said. You got to make sure that when you look at this, that you don't make a hasty decision like a lot of us do today. Because we're so consumed with numbers. It would be a major mistake to suggest that Paul in Athens was not as impactful as he was in Thessalonica and Berea because of these numbers. Because you'll be drawing a hasty and erroneous conclusion. Because here's the thing, Paul wasn't told to leave Athens. He had to leave Thessalonica. He had to leave Berea, but he wasn't told to leave. So the assumption is that he stayed there and he continued to be able to share this gospel with people who would listen. Athens was not easy for Paul's message to translate, but what I do know is, especially when he summarized their history as the times of ignorance, when you are in a highly philosophical, intellectual environment, that's a little bit of a hit. But here's what I want y'all to know. The soil here wasn't deep. And it contained a lot of weeds. But there was a small harvest. I'm done, I'm out of here. Jesus talks about in Mark 4 conditions of soil. Here is the entire Bible study of the night. Our job is simply to sow. That's it. If you're listening tonight, and if you're somebody who you know of God, and you are aware of God, and you even worship God, I said you know of Him. The problem is you don't know Him. You haven't really accepted that God is so good, He's so great, He's so gracious, that He gave His only begotten Son. Paul says you don't have to worship a God that you don't know. He wants to be known. And Paul recognized that the soil, it was light. He recognized that it wasn't deep. He recognized that there were weeds that could come up and choke this word out. But our job, you all, is to present Christ to people who are wise in their own ways, but ignorant to the true wisdom of the Word of God. In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 26, he says, not many wise men after the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But y'all, here's what I want you to say. We're praying. Some are. And just like Paul has taken this gospel to Athens, I want to challenge you to take the gospel to your Athens.